A thematic literature review is a literature review where the structure is organised around different themes. Now, these themes might be ideas, concepts, events and topics that all relate to your research topic and your research questions. But how do you write one? Stay tuned because I'm going to help you do that. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Yardley, and over the last 20 years I have helped many students with their literature reviews. The literature review can be such a pain point when it comes to your PhD or your master's dissertation. How to start it, how to structure it, how to develop it, how not to make a complete mess of it. Now, in the field that I work, which is qualitative social science research, the literature reviews that we tend to do are thematic literature reviews. They really do come with a whole host of unique challenges. So in this video, I'm going to be talking you through how you can avoid getting stuck, how you can avoid those stumbling blocks. But before we get into that, if you're watching this video, you're probably doing a thematic literature review right now. And if so, you're going to find this helpful. It's my step-by-step PDF guide to doing a thematic literature review. In it, I walk you through the step-by-step start to finish process of doing a thematic literature review. And it comes with a whole host of planners as well, which you can use to map out your own ideas. To find out more, click on the link that's appearing on screen right now, or go and check out the link in the description later on. Okay, let's get into it. So first up, what is a thematic literature review? Well, as I said at the start of the video, a thematic literature review is a literature review where the structure is organised around different themes. Those different themes might include ideas, concepts, events, topics, all of which relate to your research title and your research questions. It all depends on what you're studying, and that is the great thing about thematic literature reviews. No two thematic literature reviews are exactly the same. You can make them your own, you can build them around your research topic. And the degree of freedom that that gives you is absolutely great, but at the same time it can be quite overwhelming because you've got to come up with those themes. One of the most common questions that I get asked about thematic literature reviews is how many themes should I have? And I always say that in the final written up version of your thematic literature review, there should be between 3 and 5 themes. Any less than that, and it's quite likely that you've missed out some important material, or you've tried to squash things underneath a small number of headings that don't really fit under a small number of headings. Any more than this, and your literature review is probably going to come off as a bit fragmented. It might not have made the connections across different bodies of literature that it needed to make, or you've just tried to cover too much ground. So the final written up version of your thematic literature review should have between 3 and 5 headings. Now, the reason that I'm emphasising in the final written up version of your literature review, you should have between 3 and 5 themes, is that when you're in the process of developing your literature review, you're probably going to have more themes than that, and that's perfectly fine. We'll get onto that in a while, but before we do, I think it might be helpful to have a look at a thematic literature review so you can see how one might be structured. Looking at examples like this can be really useful because you can see what headings there might be, what the themes might look like. So the example that we've got here is a literature review from a fictional made-up PhD thesis with the title Retired Police Officers' Experiences of Belonging Beyond the Job, a qualitative study of social network evolution in retirement. So here you can see that we've got 4 key themes that we're structuring the literature review around. Firstly, transitioning identities. Secondly, social networks in retirement. Thirdly, adapting to community life. And fourthly, challenges and barriers. And underneath those themes, underneath those headings, you can see examples of the kind of studies, the kind of literature that would be critically analysed within them. So can you see how the thematic structure of this literature review effectively covers all elements of that title? It breaks it down into quite manageable and quite logical chunks while still enabling connections across them. So each section builds on the previous section, and that ensures a really coherent and comprehensive exploration of the topic. So feel free to pause the video or take a screenshot just to have a good read through this stuff. So we've got our lovely example of a thematic literature review there, but how do you get to that? How do you get to that point? What process do you need to follow to have this neat number of headings with all of the literature arranged beautifully underneath them? Well, first up, you need to start by identifying some provisional themes. Now, I'm placing the emphasis on the word provisional themes, okay? These themes might not make it into the final version of our literature review. We might end up using a completely different structure altogether, but we need to get out of the starting blocks. We've got to begin somewhere, so let's take our title and start with that. Your research title can provide you with a roadmap for exploring relevant literature. By having a really good look at your title, you're going to be able to anticipate potential themes, potential concepts that you can use to structure your literature review. And by doing this exercise, by really taking the time to take a close look at your title, this is going to save you a lot of time when it comes to your literature search. You'll be less likely to encounter one of the common stumbling blocks of a thematic literature review, which is essentially going off on a massive tangent, disappearing down a rabbit hole, going and reviewing literature that really isn't relevant. That can happen to a lot of people doing thematic literature reviews. They go and just launch into the literature without much of a plan, and they get completely lost. They end up spending hours, days, weeks exploring bodies of literature that might not actually be relevant. But if you do a really good job of looking at your title and understanding exactly what it is that you need from the literature, that's much less likely to happen. So essentially what you need to do is write down your title on a piece of paper and just spend half an hour brainstorming around it. What are some of the basic themes or ideas that we can pick out from that title to help us start mapping out a structure for the literature review? This involves taking a really close look at that title, really taking the time to think about what lies behind those words in the title. What are the related concepts, the related ideas that might be helpful here? And the initial themes that we develop are going to help us get started. They're going to help us map out a provisional structure. Let's take a look at another example. So our example title here is Second Generation Migrants' Experiences of Workplace Discrimination in Scotland, a Qualitative Exploration. Now, let's identify some basic themes or ideas we can pick out from that title to help us start developing a structure. So pick out a few key words, a few key phrases, and write a little description about what that theme might encompass. So the first theme we might pick out is Second Generation Migrants in Scotland. And this theme would focus on individuals who were born or raised in Scotland, a country that's different from their parents' country of origin. It might include aspects like their cultural identity, acculturation experiences, and sense of belonging. The second thing we might pick out is workplace discrimination. And that theme might revolve around various forms of unfair treatment or prejudice experienced by second generation migrants in the workplace. It might include things like discrimination based on race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, language, or cultural background. Thirdly, we might take that word experiences and develop a theme around that. So this theme might highlight the lived experiences and perspectives of second generation migrants regarding workplace discrimination. It might involve exploring their narratives, their challenges, their coping strategies, and the impact that discrimination had on their well-being and their career advancement. Now, by identifying these initial themes, we've got a provisional structure. Yay! But where do we go from here? The next thing you need to do is the literature search. So you take your themes one at a time and you identify key words and key phrases that you can use to search the literature. Let's get that example back up. Say we wanted to look for literature around that first theme. Now, you know that little description of the theme that you wrote for yourself? Use that. Highlight the key words and the key phrases and use those to search the literature. So hop onto Google Scholar or whatever platform it is you're using and use some of those keywords and key phrases to find relevant literature. If you need some help with literature searching, I will put a link on the screen right now to a video that you'll find useful. And one thing that I'm really keen to emphasise about the literature search when you're doing a thematic literature review is to stay focused. Just handle one theme at a time, okay? Because if you're trying to search for literature across different themes simultaneously, you're going to get overwhelmed really quickly. So pick one theme to get started with. Do your literature search using the keywords and the key phrases that you've generated. Scan through the search results and pick between 5 and 10 items of literature to review. So you'll have between 5 and 10 items of literature specifically about that one theme. Read those items, critically review those items, start writing up notes on those items. Just make sure that you stay within that one theme to begin with, okay? Otherwise, your attention gets diluted, you don't really gain any traction with any of your individual themes, and you just end up getting really overwhelmed and feeling like you're not making any progress. And by focusing on that one theme, by focusing on those 5 to 10 items of literature that you've chosen to begin with, you can really get into it. You can gain some traction, you can start to see connections between the ideas and the concepts that relate to that theme. And when you do this, you will feel like you're making progress. You will feel accomplished. You will feel like you're actually getting some traction with that theme. If you just flip from one theme to the other constantly, you're not going to gain any momentum with any of them. So one theme at a time. I think I've made that point strongly enough. Shall we move on? Next up, get messy. When you're developing a thematic literature review, it's not going to stay neat and tidy for very long. It's not going to stay perfectly aligned with those provisional themes that you identified at the beginning. It's going to be a state. During the course of reviewing the literature, you're going to think of other themes, other headings, related topics that you want to put in. So do that. You might come to realise that one or more of those provisional themes that you identified isn't really relevant after all, so you might want to take them out. That's fine, do it. Sometimes the things that seem really important at the beginning become less important as you go along, as you learn more about the topic, as you read more of the literature. But the main point that I'm trying to get across here is that the process of developing a thematic literature review is a messy one. And that is completely normal. It's completely fine. It does not have to be neat and tidy all the way through. Don't try to constrain yourself as you're developing your thematic literature review, as you're developing the structure of it. Don't try and write to 3, 4, or 5 themes and just keep everything really tight within that. Give yourself the opportunity to be messy, because that's where the magic is. Whilst you're developing your thematic literature review, have as many headings as you want. If you want 7 headings, have 7. If you want 10, if you want 15, knock yourself out. You've got to be okay with volume and mess if you're writing a thematic literature review. And I always compare it to clearing out a wardrobe or a closet. You've got to chuck it all on the floor, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to see everything that's there, to make a decision, what to keep, what to get rid of, and then how are you going to arrange it all when it goes back in the wardrobe. So you've got to get it all out. Be okay with the fact that your thematic literature review is going to get messier before it gets tidier. You'll start out with those nice, neat provisional headings, and then you'll search the literature and you'll discover that something else is important, so you want to put that heading in, and before you know it, it's going to be a bit of a mess. Then you'll go through a process of saying, okay, that topic, that heading, that theme, that's not relevant, that can go. And then you'll be like, that topic there and that topic there, they belong together, so I'm going to consolidate them. Or that topic over there is too big, I need to split it down into 2 or 3 different topics. And all of this is completely normal. It's part of the process. Because of the nature of a thematic literature review, it takes some work. Whilst you're developing it, it's supposed to be messy, it's supposed to be untidy. Mess equals progress. So now we're comfortable with embracing mess and we are ready to embrace mess, what do we do next? Don't leave your messy, developing thematic literature review alone for too long. Make sure that you are regularly revisiting it. It's essential that you keep coming back to it, okay? Do not leave it too long in between literature review sessions. It's essential to keep coming back to your literature review, even if that's only for a short time each week. If you leave it too long without looking at it, you might forget where you were or what you were trying to do. You might lose track of the decisions you made about how to organise it or what to include. It's like that book that all of us have got on our bedside table, that book that we really want to read. That book that we might have read a chapter of a few months ago, a few weeks ago, and then when we go back to it, when we pick it up again, we've kind of lost where we got to. We've got to backtrack, we've got to remind ourselves of what happened in the last few pages or even the last few chapters. The same thing can happen with your literature review. By revisiting it really frequently, you stay connected to your thoughts and your decisions. It makes it much easier to pick up where you left off. And make sure that you ask for feedback on your literature review as well, especially whilst it's developing. Another one of the common stumbling blocks that I come across with students who are doing thematic literature reviews is that they want to kind of keep it all to themselves until it's, quote, finished, and then they'll share it with their supervisor. But actually, by sharing some of your early drafts, you're going to get your literature review written quicker, you're going to get those ideas going quicker, it's going to be a much less painful process. So share your ideas, share your thoughts, share the structure that's emerging and get some feedback on that. You'll get fresh perspectives that'll help you see things you might have missed. They can offer you suggestions for improvement. They can point out where you need to clarify your ideas. So be sure to go and check out my step-by-step guide to writing a thematic literature review. Drop your questions in the comments and come back for the next video.